In this video, I will explain why polycarbonate deteriorates, how manufacturers save on it in ways we don't notice, and what installation mistakes can lead to very unfortunate consequences. Additionally, if you are interested in cellular polycarbonate specifically, please visit our website. We have selected the most optimal polycarbonate options for greenhouses from trusted manufacturers who provide warranties and certifications for their products. Good day, dear friends. My name is Alexander, and you are on the Eco Greenhouse channel. The decision to make a video about why cellular polycarbonate deteriorates came about for several reasons. Firstly, due to your inquiries and comments about cellular polycarbonate, and secondly, from observing many sites where the polycarbonate was almost completely destroyed and rendered useless, requiring action. To understand why this happens, we decided to prepare this video. What causes the deterioration of cellular polycarbonate? First, let's look at the material itself. Cellular polycarbonate is made from polycarbonate granules using an extrusion process to form sheets. Standard sheet sizes are 2 meters 10 centimeters wide and typically 12 meters long, but for practicality and ease of use, they are often offered in 6-meter lengths. So, the size is 2.10 meters by 6 meters, with the factory standard being 12 meters. Naturally, other sizes can be ordered, but these are usually custom orders. Polycarbonate, being a polymer, naturally degrades and breaks down under ultraviolet light. The molecular chains begin to break, causing it to age very quickly. To prevent this, ultraviolet stabilizers are added. Some stabilizers are mixed into the bulk material, but the main protection comes from a UV protective layer applied to the outer surface during extrusion. This layer is usually 30 to 60 microns thick, which is generally sufficient considering that about 3–5 microns of UV protection are lost per year. How does UV protection work? This layer simply absorbs all the harsh ultraviolet light and prevents it from reaching the polymers, which would otherwise break down. As a result, in structures covered with cellular polycarbonate, there is no harsh ultraviolet light, making it impossible to get a tan. All the harsh ultraviolet light is blocked. Since UV protection is applied only to one side, this is done for cost savings, as about 20–30% of the material's cost is due to this protection. Therefore, it is applied to only one side. When buying polycarbonate, there will always be a marking on the side with UV protection. The other side has a transparent film, which is often not even visible, and some people don't remove it. However, it must be removed because if you don't, it will start to peel off within a month, looking very unsightly. This film is only for protection during transportation and before installation. Therefore, when covering any structure, the side of the polycarbonate sheet with UV protection must always face upwards. Usually, during installation, we remove the bottom film immediately, and the top film only after the polycarbonate is installed and secured, to avoid confusion. There have been cases where, for example, a greenhouse is installed correctly, but one sheet turns yellow. Why does it turn yellow? Because it was installed incorrectly, with the wrong side facing up, causing it to degrade. During installation, it's crucial to position the polycarbonate correctly, ensuring the UV protection is on top to absorb the main impact from the sun. 2. I will try to answer a frequently asked question: how to treat the edges of polycarbonate. This is a rather complex process. Here we have a polycarbonate sheet, and it is usually treated as follows. We have the polycarbonate and the film. The top layer has a film with drawings and inscriptions, and it should always be on top. The bottom layer is transparent. Both films need to be removed about 10 centimeters from the edge. Thus, we clean the edge, and then the profile is attached very simply. According to installation rules, the wide side should face inwards, and the narrow side outwards. So, we insert the profile, starting from the beginning, and then the profile is fixed as follows. We take it, secure it, start pressing with a screwdriver, directing it, and close it. That's it. The edge of the polycarbonate is closed. Further, if we are selecting connecting profiles, and if our greenhouse is arched, to connect one sheet to another using a connecting profile, we need to take one size larger. When installing a connecting profile, the wide part goes down, and the narrow part goes up. When we start installing polycarbonate through a connecting profile in an arch, it somewhat reduces its size. That is, Due to the curvature, inserting a 6 mm polycarbonate sheet into a 6 mm profile is very difficult. Therefore, if your polycarbonate is 4 mm, you need to take a 6 mm profile, and if it is 6 mm, then an 8 mm connecting profile, and so on. The thicker the polycarbonate, the easier it is to insert it into the profile. So, these are basically the basics of how to secure end and connecting elements of polycarbonate. When choosing polycarbonate, naturally, a lot depends on the raw material from which it is made. Initially, 4 mm polycarbonate weighed 0.8 kg/square meter, and 6 mm weighed 1.2 kg/square meter. This was the density of the polycarbonate. What does this mean? It means that 1 square meter of polycarbonate has this specific mass. To reduce the cost of the material, they went two ways. First, reducing the mass, that is, simply making the walls thinner, and with the same thickness, we get a lower density. The density decreases, and the polycarbonate becomes very soft. You can easily push it with your finger because it has very little mass. If there is enough mass, it is very difficult to push it, only with 2 fingers. All the cells in full-weight polycarbonate are very clear, they have a complete geometric shape, and all cells are the same size. Such polycarbonate is given UV protection of at least 30 microns, that's for sure, and in principle, if conscientious manufacturers write a 15-year warranty, then it should be at least 50 microns. Another question is that there are different UV stabilization types, and the quality of one UV stabilization and another stabilization is very different. These are, as they say, trade secrets. I don't know them. I only heard in passing that the quality of UV stabilizers also varies greatly, and given that about 20–30% of the material's cost is UV stabilization, then naturally, how to save on stabilization, that is, either minimize it or make it very cheap. Therefore, if there is full-weight polycarbonate with full light stabilization, then to make cheaper options, they went by reducing weight and reducing the thickness of UV stabilization. One of the first polycarbonate manufacturers was Polygal, an Israeli factory, and they, to check the clarity of the UV thickness application, added a blue dye to the UV stabilization, and then in test samples, you could see how the UV stabilization was applied to the sheet, due to the bluish color. Now there are even cases where they simply add this dye without UV stabilization, and it seems like there's blueness, but in fact, there is no UV stabilization. Therefore, when choosing polycarbonate, it is worth paying attention to verified manufacturers, because, well, this is a material on which you can save a lot, while the end consumer may not see this, and it will show up in 2 or 3 years. The polycarbonate will start to yellow, holes will appear, and it will become very brittle. When choosing cellular polycarbonate, it is advisable to look at the manufacturer, not just at parameters like thickness and price. We are asked, does the thickness of polycarbonate affect its service life? We answer on the one hand, it doesn't seem to affect it, because the main factor that affects the service life is UV protection, but on the other hand, the thing is that 4 mm, for example, is polycarbonate that originally appeared as a material, that is, it was used for posters, for stands, where there is no load at all, but it was quite cheap and it went further in greenhouse construction. 6 mm polycarbonate has 1.8 times better load-bearing capacity than 4 mm polycarbonate. The 6 mm one will last and hold on the structure significantly longer than, for example, the 4 mm one. The 6 mm one is, of course, more expensive, and it is, in principle, at least 1.5 times more expensive. That's the second factor. The third factor, naturally, when we cover the greenhouse, it is absolutely necessary to make sure where the UV protection is. And even if you remove the protective film, be sure to mark where the UV protection is. After removing the protection, the main thing is not to confuse where the sunny side is. Then, when you have marked all the sheets, folded them and cut them, then you will not panic when you start installing these sheets. Next question, why does polycarbonate break down in places, point-wise? I answer, when applying UV protection to polycarbonate, it is not applied absolutely evenly, that is, it can be 40, 50, 60 microns, so the UV protection can jump, and where there is less thickness of UV protection, primary holes may appear, which immediately begin to appear on the polycarbonate. Dirt, dust, and water get into these holes, and the cells begin to get dirty, and the light transmission immediately drops. Therefore, as soon as the polycarbonate begins to turn yellow, it becomes sad. Well, then it turns out that polycarbonate can still work for 2 years, even when it starts to turn yellow, and even when a primary hole appears, it continues to work until it simply breaks down under the pressure of snow at one point. Therefore, polycarbonate that is yellow can break at the most inopportune moment. Watch which side you install the polycarbonate when installing. The second point is to monitor the polycarbonate. In no case do not wash it with any solvents or anything else, because you are violating its surface structure. I hope this information was useful to you. Apply it in everyday life. Subscribe to our channel, ring the bell. We constantly post very useful and practical information about agriculture and beyond. Have a good harvest, live in harmony with nature and in the rhythm of progress. Until next time.